As important as it is for you to be respected, it's just as important for you to respect others. So in this video, we're going to talk about what respect is, why it's so important, and how to not just express it, but also to embody it, to actually be a respectful person. So what is respect? I'd say in simple terms, it's just having a high regard for the thoughts, feelings, and needs of another person. And why is it so important? I'd say there are several reasons. For one, I talked about this in my video on empathy as well as double standards. In a world where nobody really owes anybody anything by default, the only grounds upon which you can even start to argue that somebody owes you respect is if you're willing to give others respect, because otherwise you're just expecting something without providing anything in return. Also, if you're ever upset with somebody and you want that to have an impact so that they change how they treat you, then you're not really going to have anything to revoke as sort of a privilege if you weren't respectful in the beginning so that they feel like they're missing out. If you're just disrespectful all the time, then there's not really any difference, or is there any incentive for them to change how they treat you? So with that said, let's go ahead and talk about some ways that you can be a more respectful person. So number one is don't be reductionistic in your view of other people. That is, don't assume that one thing about them tells you everything there is to know about them, because there's so much more to a person than that. Some things tell you very little about somebody, and other things tell you nothing at all, namely things that they can't control. So in that latter category, I'd place things like someone's ethnicity, or their gender, their parents' marital status, or maybe where they're from, because they didn't have any control over those things, so it doesn't really say much about them. And even if you want to argue for a second that maybe it influences how they think, then you're completely ignoring the fact that there's still a person under the surface who has the free will to decide how they want to respond to those things. That's why it's reductionistic. And it even applies to the former category. Just because you know one thing about somebody that tells you a little bit about them, you still have to take the time to get to know them instead of trying to categorize them, because they could still think differently from other people who have those traits in common with them. So for example, if you know somebody's political beliefs, that doesn't just mean that they're the exact same person as everybody else that has those same political beliefs. So you do have to kind of hold back on the judgment when you first meet somebody and instead take the time to get to know them. Number two is be diplomatic and equal in your application of respect towards people when you first meet them and you don't know anything there is to know about them. Treat everyone the same. Because if you're not, and you're going around picking and choosing, then that implies that you're either only doing it because you've determined that you can get something out of it, in which case you're just being self-centered and you're not actually a respectful person, you're just being fake and inauthentic, or it implies that, again, you're being reductionistic. You've noticed one or two things about that person that you think tells you everything you need to know about them. It doesn't matter if someone's a waiter at a restaurant or the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. At the end of the day, we're all fundamentally the same. We're all human beings that are deserving of the same level of dignity and respect. So instead of picking and choosing like that, give people a chance to prove to you who they are. Third, treat others how you want to be treated, like I've said 100 times before. And like I said a second ago, it doesn't make any sense to be the type of person that expects everybody to respect you while you're not willing to turn around and reciprocate and respect other people. But also, if you maintain that as a framework, that you're only going to say or do something if other people would feel respected by it, then you can kind of use that as a roadmap to gauge whether what you're about to do is actually respectful. So, for example, if a friend's visiting you from out of town and you feel like you want to tell them to take an Uber to your house instead of picking them up at the airport, then put yourself in their position and ask yourself how you would feel if you were them. If you wouldn't like that, I know if that were me, I probably wouldn't feel very respected by that, then you shouldn't be treating others that same way. Next, don't presume people's feelings. Don't assume that if you're going to say or do something that might be ambiguous or polarizing some way, that everybody's just going to be okay with that. Because even if you're correct, then it's just a coincidence. And people are left wondering, well, hypothetically, if you had been wrong about that, then what would have happened, right? And the answer is nothing, because you didn't care. You didn't express any concern for that. And you've also got to keep in mind that sometimes it's not very appropriate for people to express to you that they feel disrespected by what you said or did. But you can't mistake their positive response for meaning that they didn't feel disrespected by it. So, for example, I've actually seen this happen once or twice before. If you're out to dinner and you tell your waiter or waitress that they physically resemble a celebrity, yeah, some people might take that as a compliment, but other people might not. Some people might see it as reductionistic. You're trying to compare them to somebody else, so they don't actually matter. And so you have to express concern for that. That's one of the possible solutions. You can say, I don't mean anything by this, not to be judgmental or dismissive or anything like that. You could also wait until the setting's more appropriate, because remember, you're out to dinner, so they can't really say that makes me feel disrespected, right? They have to respond positively to that. or you can just resist the temptation and let it go. Sometimes really that's the best course of action you can take. Number 5, be less self-centered. In any group setting that you're in, don't just have the first consideration be, are my needs being taken care of and am I comfortable? Instead, it should be the exact opposite. Give others priority. Make sure that they're taken care of first. So if you're sharing a carpool with some people, don't make a beeline for riding shotgun. Let somebody else sit up front. If you're out to dinner with somebody and you get your food first, don't start eating it until they get theirs too. If you're trying to board an elevator or an escalator at the same time as somebody else, stop and let them go first, etc. Number 6, listen more than you talk. And I did a video on this entitled How to Be a Good Listener. But the short of it is, don't be so quick and so eager to try to get your point out there that you just keep interrupting the other person and cutting them off whenever you guys are having a conversation, because that conveys disrespect because you're showing that you don't care about what they have to say. So instead, let them finish their sentence and actually take what they have to say seriously and mull it over before you give a response. Now, I know this list is getting kind of long, but bear with me, I'm almost done. Number 7 is exercise emotional restraint. Don't be so quick to express extreme emotions like extreme elation, or worse yet, sadness, anger, frustration, because if there's no space between you feeling that emotion and then expressing it, then you're showing that, for one, you don't care about how that's going to make the other person feel and what kind of an impact that's going to have on them, but also it's very confrontational. People have to respond certain ways to you being really sad, such as comforting you, or you being really angry, such as by apologizing to you, or maybe even they have to stand up for themselves now if other people are watching to kind of defend their reputation. So people are not really going to appreciate the fact that you're not giving them a choice. So check out my video entitled Should You Show Emotion for more details on that. Now, much in the same way that you need to exercise emotional restraint, you also have to control your curiosity and avoid asking people invasive personal questions, things that they are not comfortable with. Avoid those touchy subjects. And sometimes you might not know what somebody considers to be sensitive, and that's okay. But as soon as they tell you that they don't want to talk about something, you need to respect those boundaries and not just keep asking about them over and over again because you're curious. So for example, if you want to ask somebody about their parents' divorce and how that impacts their lives, then some people might be okay with talking about that, but some others might not. And they'll tell you, hey, you know what, don't really want to talk about that, kind of a touchy subject. So after that, that should be enough for you. Don't just keep pressing it and saying, oh, come on, I'm curious, just tell me this or that. It's not worth sacrificing a friendship and making somebody feel disrespected just for you to satisfy your curiosity. So just drop it and accept the fact that you're not going to know and move on and find something else to talk about. And lastly, if you've made it this far, I'm very impressed and also very appreciative. The last item on the list here is to balance seriousness with humor. And I did a video entitled just that, which I recommend you check out. But the short version, again, is you don't want to just be stoic and serious all the time and convey that you don't want to offer somebody friendship. And you also don't want to be joking around and just be sarcastic all the time and confuse people and make them feel like they're just some kind of rag doll for you to poke and prod for your own entertainment. So the 3 solutions I talk about in that video are account for context. It's okay to loosen up when you're hanging out with friends, but you also don't want to be telling jokes at a meeting at work or at a funeral or something. Lessen the amount of jokes you tell at other people's expense because you don't want them to feel, again, they could feel disrespected if you don't show that there's some kind of a limit to that. Instead, tell jokes at your own expense. Don't be too self-deprecating, of course. And the last thing is clarify when you're just kidding or when you're being serious. You don't want to confuse people and make them think that you're doing that for your own entertainment or that you're doing it because you're socially inept. So on a concluding note, and this is very important, so I want to make sure I drive this home, I'm not saying that you need to feel like you're walking on eggshells around people all the time and that they have these delicate feelings that you should only care about above all else. I'm just saying do your due diligence, be respectful, and then if after that point somebody still wants to feel offended, then that's where you have to start commanding a little bit of respect for yourself. And I did do a video entitled just that, which I recommend you check out as well. So hope this helps, and I'll see you next time.